This is a video about the incomplete leadership of the famous former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, who has an influential YouTube channel that he promotes ideology from, and he gives advice to people about leadership. And I need to point out how he's lacking in a fundamental epistemology that can ground ethics. The ethics that he promotes, they're not grounded in an epistemology. There's no way to know why we should ultimately do the things that he's telling us to do. He talks about how discipline equals freedom, and he helps people understand how to do certain things, but there's ultimately, at the end of the day, there's the question of why should we do these different things. I recently listened to a podcast he did. It was on his Underground podcast, and he talked about dealing with certain problems and how people get emotionally overwhelmed when various problems pop up at the same time. And he was giving advice on how to deal with this situation, and he talked about how people get overwhelmed, and he mentioned even to the point of suicide. And the question arises, what's wrong with suicide in Jocko Willink's worldview? Jocko is not a Christian, and he doesn't promote Christianity. He doesn't speak these things through a Christian worldview. He doesn't tell us that glorifying God is the ultimate goal that we should be striving for. He doesn't tell us that building the kingdom of God is the ultimate goal of what we should be working towards. And so we're just left with this kind of self-centered, self-seeking worldview based on human opinions. And the question arises, well, is it actually wrong in the non-Christian worldview to kill yourself if your problems are too much for you? And why would that be wrong? If that's the best thing for you, if that's what you feel like doing, and you feel like you can't overcome all these problems that have suddenly overwhelmed you, why is it objectively wrong to kill yourself in Jocko Willink's worldview, his non-Christian worldview? Why? This cannot be explained. Maybe any nihilist could say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to kill yourself. Anybody who has a different worldview than Jocko could say, hey, well, my worldview is you should just kill yourself. Or Jocko recently mentioned how the right thing to do, if you have a sick cat and there's no medical solution to the sick cat, you should put your cat down. You should kill your cat. Well, why? I mean, why for a cat should you do that? I mean, does Jocko think you should do that for humans? If there's a sick human and there's no medical solution to their problem and they're eventually going to die, should you put them out of their misery and just kill them? Well, God doesn't say that. God says you shall not murder. That would be an unjust killing of a human being. In the Christian worldview, you should trust in the providence of God. You should pray. You can ask for a miracle from God, and God could restore that person. But for Jocko, it's, hey, you just killed a cat. Well, we need to ask Jocko, why aren't you consistent and say, well, a cat's really no different than a human being. They're just in an atheistic worldview, in a non-Christian worldview, and a cat and a human being have the same moral value. They have the same value, so why not just kill your kid? If your kid has a terminal illness, just kill them off. Put them out of their misery. Does Jocko think that's okay? I don't think so. But yeah, he says kill the cat. And Jocko, I've heard him talk about mention God. I don't know if he believes that God exists, or in some, he doesn't believe in the Christian God, that's clear, but maybe he believes in some deistic God, some notion of a different kind of God than Christianity. But that God that he trusts in, there's pretty clearly no revelation from that God that he's trusting in. He's trusting ultimately in human opinions, and because there is no other God than Yahweh, any revelation from any other God he'd be trusting in wouldn't actually be revelation from a God. It would be a true God. It would be some kind of demonic force, or it would be some kind of human opinion propped up to be the ultimate God, the one true God, the ultimate source of truth that you're looking to, the ultimate standard for truth. the thing that you love and fear and obey. That's ultimately what we should be doing for God. We should be loving him, fearing him, and obeying him. He's the ultimate source of truth. He's the ultimate standard for ethics, where we can ground our ethical framework, where we can say this is actually right, this is actually wrong, because God says it's wrong, and he's going to judge everyone by this objective standard and punish people according to that objective standard on Judgment Day. There's going to be a separation of the sheep and the goats on Judgment Day. The people who violated God's law, who refused Jesus Christ, those people will be punished with everlasting torment. The people who love God's law, people who are saved by Jesus Christ, those people, they are the ones who have the ethical framework that makes sense of reality. They have the ethical grounding. Those people will live forever with God in peace and joy. So there's real consequences for your actions. There's real consequences for violations of this objective standard of morality. And it's objective because God applies his law to every single person. Everyone is going to be judged by that specific objective standard on Judgment Day. That's going to be the metric used to measure everyone. And those who aren't represented by Jesus will have no covering for their sin. They'll have no forgiveness of their sin. They'll have no representation by the perfect one, and therefore they will be thrown into hellfire and tortured forever because of their failure to see God's standard as the ethical standard that we need to be following. I was in the military briefly in college. I was in Army ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps. So I was training and receiving leadership training in the Army from my freshman through almost the end of my junior year of college. In those semesters I was in college. And during that time I learned about what's called an operations order. And for short they call it an op-ord. And in an operations order, you're supposed to list for a mission who, what, when, where, and why. To describe a mission to send down to your subordinates, you have to write up an op-ord, you have to write up this operations order, and you have to list the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. This is basic Army leadership. So you have to be a clear communicator. You have to write these things down in this operations order so that your soldiers know what's going to happen, who's going to carry it out, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and why it's going to happen. And it's very important that you tell your soldiers why they're doing what they're doing. It helps motivate them. It helps give them a sense of purpose. And without it, they're just kind of blindly obeying orders, and they don't really know what the true objective is, and it's detrimental to the mission. With Jocko's philosophy, we're ultimately left without a complete why. Jocko is giving us a mission without the why. And that's a big problem. He can say, oh, it's because of this and this and this and that. You want discipline because it gives you freedom, but then we have to ask the question, okay, why freedom? Why not killing yourself? If that's what you want, why not do that? Why are we ultimately doing all of these things? And he doesn't have a clear answer for that. It's like more utilitarian, where, well, this will get you here, this will get you there, but he doesn't delve deeply into the philosophy of why we do what we do, what the true nature of reality is. And when in the who of the mission, what we are, who we are, actually matters. We're people created in the image of God, created to glorify God. That makes the mission. That really defines the mission for us. And then the why of the mission, why are we doing what we're doing? Are we doing it to please ourselves? Is it just you do whatever you want? Well, that leads to chaos, because if it's ultimately for you and the human, based on human opinions, you can justify anything, and you can start justifying atrocious acts, you can start justifying suicide because, hey, it's what I want, it's what the human wants, and it betters my situation. If I think suicide is best for me, then it's best for me, and it's going to solve my problems because my life is agony. And if life is agony, then just put your cat down, just kill the person, just maybe I should shoot myself if life is agony. Like, there's no antidote to that mindset with Jocko's philosophy. He doesn't delve into the epistemological basis that actually can truly give us a satisfactory why for what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing, why he's giving us the advice that he's giving us, why we exist, why we live the way we live. And the Bible gives us the why. The Bible gives us our mission. It gives us the who, what, when, where, and why. And we need to trust the Bible and not Jocko. We need to trust in revelation from the all-knowing being and not finite human opinions that are limited and that can very easily lead us astray. So that's why Jocko Willink is an incomplete leader. He does not give a complete operations order. He does not give a complete why in the mission, and he doesn't know who really is the who of the mission. And let's look to the Bible for our marching orders and be soldiers of Jesus Christ.